So, Darwinian evolution refers to descent with modification and natural selection.
Modification, interesting. I want to look at modification. The action of modifying something, parts supplied, change made. I guess if he's using the term just synonymous with the change, he's not really saying anything. But I like to focus on these terms because if modification inside the evolutionary view means to go from point A to point B, and what you're saying by modification, you're saying some sort of adaptation that adds usability, functionality, specified tasks. If that's what he means by modification, he's already appealed to some sort of direction.
It sounds like he wants to talk about neo-Darwinism, but that's not what he called the debate. So that's his bad. So again, Darwin didn't know anything about genetics. He didn't know about DNA, anything like that. No concept of mutation. Neo-Darwinism, he's taking this reaction video I did where I spoke off the cuff, trying to remember dates. So, okay, I said 1920. And then modern synthesis, right? If you want to refer to extended synthesis, whatever syntheses you want to refer to, once we understood DNA and all of these other evolutionary mechanisms. And so what important thing to understand for this debate is that Darwinism is in the middle. It is part of the modern synthesis. So variation being acted upon by natural selection is still an enormous part of evolution. Absolutely.
Acted on by natural selection. That's the thing that always gets me. That's their mechanism, right? Now they just slip it in, seems like something that Dave would do. They don't talk about what that means ever. It's always like this. It's always like there's two things that they argue at the same time. One is a random mutation produces some effect, and then the effect produces, some sort of function that is either advantageous or disadvantageous. It doesn't have any direction to it. It just accidentally produces whatever it does. And then what they call the environment puts a pressure on this thing and says, this either works for the environment or it doesn't. Simple. They also switch it and they say the environment triggers, does some sort of triggering, some input, and it almost tells or prompts or provokes the organism to doing a random mutation that's compatible with what's provoking it. So which is it? They never really tell you which it is.
These zero biologists reject this idea. Each model encapsulates the prior. Nothing is lost. More is simply added. So Sabor is going to imply that Noble, all these other people, are pushing alternatives to Darwinism. They don't. It's
Ortho bro. Yes, Darwin was pure observation. That's what's so frustrating about it. And these people, the Dave Farinas, the irony is that they're the science deniers. And the evolution deniers are actually the science affirmers. We're the ones who are very strict in our scientific investigation. Just watching things, watching finches, watching animals is an observation. You're observing the effect. Now, coincidentally, they did the same thing with gravity. I almost blame Einstein for introducing this concept of modeling as some sort of viable alternative to a rigid hypothesis in an experiment. It's not. We saw that with the coronavirus thing, didn't we? We saw that modeling turns out not to be science.
It's in there. Now the bit about being a fact. Sabor doesn't actually know what a fact is. Objects and concepts are not facts. Would you say that a chair is a fact? That doesn't mean anything. A fact is a singular datum.
How appropriate he's using the word facts. For those of you who did watch my debate with Planet Peterson, who has a book called Facts That Aren't True, which I purchased in good faith. Support the guy a little bit. Facts under a naturalistic view don't even exist.
We could say that that chair exists. That's a fact. Statements can be facts. Scientific facts are observations that have been repeated so many times so as to make their veracity beyond reasonable doubt, but they are never assigned any kind of supreme
proposition. You still have to interpret the observation and then turn it into a sentence. He just called the fact, right? He just called the fact a proposition about an observation. He just contradicted himself. A chair is not a fact. Correct. The proposition about a chair could be a fact. He now calls an observation a fact. A repeated observation is a fact. No, it's not.
So, for example, water boils at 100 degrees Celsius at sea level. That's been true every time anyone has ever done it, but you never know. To bring this back to the debate title, scientific concepts are not facts. We wouldn't say gravity is a fact. That doesn't mean anything. But we could say that gravity factually exists, just as we would say that evolution by Darwinian mechanism.
No, you actually couldn't say that, Dave Farina. You could say a chair exists, and you have some, by your empirical standard, you could say a chair exists, and you could say an apple exists. But with gravity, you actually can't say gravity exists factually the same way you would say a chair exists. Not at all.
Actually occurs. So, unlike a fact, which is a singular datum, a theory is a model that correlates a variety of disparate data and explains them all elegantly in a singular model, which makes falsifiable predictions. Theories can yield facts. I'm sure Sabor would agree that it is a fact that the Earth goes around the sun, and yet this understanding is called heliocentric theory.
That's not scientific theory.
Demonstrating his confusion, Sabor constantly claims...
This is all equivocation, obfuscation. It's all just making a very ambiguous, colloquial, liberal use of the term, the word theory, right? He just grants himself.
Claims that facts are absolute, certain, not subject to revision. This is false. He contrasts this with theories.
Theories don't yield facts, experiments do. Well, if you're calling a fact like something that's seemingly regular until it's not, yeah. But I would even go a step before that, Ninja of Spades. I'd say you have to assume facts which are law-like in the description of the regularity of nature and what you assume to be regular. You have to assume that first, and then you can do experiments. So experiments are still inductive. They're likelihood statements. And then the likelihood statement could be accepted. You could colloquially use that as a fact, but if someone says a fact is something that's objectively the case and cannot not be the case, then it wouldn't be true that a scientific theory yields a fact.
Which to him are hopelessly uncertain, subject to eternal revision, and can never be proven. This just shows that Sabor doesn't actually even know what science is. Proof is for mathematics and logic. Science doesn't prove anything ever.
I agree with him there.
This creates problems for Sabor's flawed
Dave Farina based
epistemology. Here is a fact derived from a theory. Is it absolute or not? Could we make an observation that could overturn the fact that the Earth goes around the sun? If yes, facts are absolute. If no, theories can be absolute. To get more clarity, let's distinguish between a priori knowledge and a posteriori knowledge. A priori knowledge is that which is gathered through reason alone. This
This is a classical foundationalist. This is this view where you just grant yourself a priori knowledge. Well, this is a whole other field of philosophy, obviously, but we're not going to get into it. But I would even check him on that. I'd be like, what? No, what he calls that knowledge is just, it's not based on reason. Reason still requires interpretation of sense data. So you have some sort of confidence or faith in a system of interpreting sense data and your evaluations. It assumes a bunch of metaphysical statements that aren't based on reason. This is like Catholic theology, but for an atheist. It's like natural theology for atheism. If you live in the time before Copernicus, which I think is spelled with a C, you wouldn't believe the Earth going around the sun is a fact. Then you would want Copernicus dead. That's not an argument. Even if that was granted, according to relativity, the observation of one or the other is consistent. You know, the observations are still consistent. In fact, once you introduce relativity, there is no static atheist 5K. There is no stationary static position of observation. So it could be the case that we're completely wrong about how where things are and what moves around what. Because why? Because under that current model, there is no static position. There's no static reference point to know. It's relative. So relativity ironically, puts into question this objective statement that it's one way or the other, that the sun goes around this, or it could be the other way around. Why? Because you don't have a static position to observe it. That's what's so silly about the statement. You're like, is that a fact? And they're like, not really. Based on relativity, it seems to be the case that this is what's happening. And you're like, could it be the other way around? Well, it could be. We just don't have a static observation point of reference. You don't.
This is limited to things like the perfect imaginary world of mathematics, where we can make deductions free from actual experience. A posteriori knowledge means through observation, which is literally all of science. If there is uncertainty here, if this is invalid, then it applies to all.
He just said a priori is you could do from reasoning and not from experience. I'm sorry, you can't separate your experience from reasoning.
All of science. This implies that we have no certainty about the shape of the Earth or atoms existing or anything like that. So if Sabor wants to take this extreme philosophical stance, then he must explain why he is exclusively freaking out about evolution, and most specifically about common ancestry for humans and other apes. Why not all the same fuss over heliocentrism? Because this science challenges his baseless faith.
Well, no, he would probably, if I were him, I would argue, I don't know what he's going to argue. I would argue that both have, both of these things have, actually everything, almost everything on this list here, has a problem with accessibility. And what I mean by accessibility is a viable hypothesis you could manipulate. Now, at best, number 3 would have, you could at least attempt to introduce a variable to demonstrate germ theory. You could actually, if you had access to the thing you're calling a germ, you can introduce it into a body and see what it does and develop some theory around it. Yes. Now, whether that occurs, that's another topic. But atomic theory, similar, right? It's a heuristic for, it's a heuristic, like a system, a model to interpret the physicality that we interact with. Relativity, I don't even know. That's being challenged as well because of quantum stuff. Heliocentric, same what I just said. Relativity influences heliocentric theory. Evolutionary theory is not even a scientific theory, which I would take Dave Farina to task on, like I've done everyone else, and proven that my cross-examination of evolution presented as a scientific theory doesn't even pass the basic rudimentary constituents, doesn't even make its way through the bullet points of a basic scientific theory that we would learn in 5th grade. Big Bang cosmology, again, you're doing post hoc, imagined past, the same thing you would do with evolutionary theory. A past, right? You're coming to some conclusion about the past that you have no access to. You don't have there's no viable hypothesis. Speaking of, Copernicus, spelt with a C, was one of the first to eloquently state the problems of mass scale observations and their limitations in science. Why? Because at a certain scale, you don't have access to a viable hypothesis because you can't manipulate. You can't remove the moon to demonstrate if the tides still maintain their behavior. You can't remove a planet or something out there in space. You can't do anything. You're just doing it all in your head.
In science, once theories hold up after decades or even centuries of verification through rigorous testing, we say that they are consistent beyond reasonable doubt. Never do theories become facts. Never do they become laws. Never do we regard them as absolute, but simply so.
Anyone got any argument verse against the Big Bang? Yeah, I would just ask, what is it? What is it? What's the Big Bang? Well, they would say, well, the Big Bang is what we refer to as this concept that the expanding universe, based on our observation, if we reversed engineered it, it would collapse into a single point if we hit the rewind button. on the VHS tape. And then you ask, well, what's that singular point? They use a mathematical term a lot of times called the singularity. Or philosophers, I forgot, who's that one Australian guy? Atheists in the chat, let me know. I forgot the name of the guy. Australian guy who's sort of running with the initial state concept, which is essentially just materialist God. An initial state in the universe that precedes all states of affairs that can't be reduced or explained or exhausted based on the current state of affairs in simple form. Graham Oppie. That's what it's like. What is that? What is that? Well, coincidentally, the initial state of being that his view doesn't require a being who's a person, but I don't know how he gets metaphysics then, which is a conceptual transcendental realm, not a material realm. The initial being for the Big Bang is a physical state. What's the physical state? I don't know. It has to precede all other states, so we can't fully understand it. We can't exhaust it with the current laws of logic, the current states of affairs, the current laws of physics, or anything else. Well, it sounds like it transcends nature itself. Coincidentally, that's what you reject when we posit God, that it transcends nature itself, that if you wanted to say it, general theism.
Incredibly consistent with reality that it would be unreasonable to presume that they are not true. Evolution is one such theory, along with germ theory, heliocentrism, and others, in an effort to distinguish something like heliocentrism from theories he doesn't like evolution. So Bohr might say that the Earth going around the sun is a fact because it's a singular observation. No, it isn't. You can't just go all the way outside the solar system and watch the planets sped up going around the sun.
Even if you did, that observation, according to relativity, would also be in question.
It's an inference based on countless observations, like the positions and motions of planets and other celestial objects.
Even positions itself, according to relativity, positions itself are all subjective and relative. Like, in a sense, if you really think about it philosophically, if you try to impose a Cartesian coordinate system, y and x, right? And what's the other one? Z. If you try to impose that on the universe, but you hold a relativist view, like the moment you say there's a position of one thing, well, relative to what? What, just your eyes? Yeah, but what are you relative now? Like, you're now a new position. You're not a static position either. According to them, everything's moving all the time. You know what I mean? Everything's moving all the time. The observer is moving all the time. Everything's moving all the time. So when he says position, the funny thing about relativity and their current model that they argue is that there is no such thing as a position. What's a position in an ever-changing system? What's a position? There is no position.
Objects, stellar parallax, and other threads of evidence. Heliocentrism correlates a wide variety of data and explains them neatly with a singular model. That's what a theory is. Other facts he
That's not what a theory is, douchebag. Listen to what he just said a theory is.
To distinguish something like heliocentrism from theories he doesn't like evolution. So Bohr might say that the Earth going around the sun is a fact because it's a singular observation. No, it isn't. You can't just go all the way outside the solar system and watch the planets sped up going around the sun. It's an inference based on countless observations, like the positions and motions of planets and other celestial objects, stellar parallax, and other threads of evidence. Heliocentrism correlates a wide variety of data and explains them neatly with a singular model. That's what a theory is.
No, that's not what a theory is. That's not science, Dave Farina, you goblin. That's not what a theory is. A theory isn't a model, because you can... Look, dude, you can have two models that share the same data and have completely different theories. If the reason we call something a theory is that it passes the test for arbitration between two competing theories. If you have just two models that share all the same data, and there's just two interpretations called a model, guess what, Dave? You don't have a system to arbitrate between two, quote, competing theories that you're calling. You don't have anything to do it. This came up with my original Peterson debate on evolution. We used scurvy. I said, what's the arbiter for two competing viable hypotheses for what causes this phenomenon? And I asked, do you need one? He said, no, you just add more data. Well, no. The problem of the competition to begin with is that they share the same data. So adding data doesn't solve the problem of the model that it's interpreting the data. These people run so liberally with this term theory, it's destroying the scientific establishment and our confidence in it, because they're taking this theory outside of the strict methodology of science. Simulations and models are not effective or sufficient substitutes for experiments, period.
Other facts he regularly cites also do not check. Water is H2O. That's an observation, so it's an absolute fact. Well, how do we know this? How do we know the molecular formula? How do we even know that atoms exist? Atomic theory. You can't observe an individual water molecule. There's another problem here. Sabor regularly says that observations are facts, so to him, an observation can be considered factual.
Okay. He already contradicted himself, and I'll bring up the slide, okay? Austin Sims, nice to see you. We call something a theory when nobody has been able to get data that falsifies it. If you have two models, dude, that sentence is so insane, Austin. No offense. How do you affirm a scientific theory if one of the first necessary things about a theory is that it's falsifiable? Do you agree, Austin, that it needs to be falsifiable? Well, sorry, Austin. Evolution is not falsifiable. So you've just kind of taken away your own gusto. Now watch this. He says observations are facts. He's making fun of this guy, right? Observations are facts, right? Watch this. He's making fun of the guy, right? For saying observations are facts. Watch this. Hold on. Scientific fact, an observation. He's making fun of the other guy for saying observations are facts. And just 3 slides ago, he says a scientific fact is an observation. Oh. Oh, gosh. Dude. Unbelievable, man. Shameless. Just shameless. Their brains don't work.
Based on the bones, as you can see by the bones, or the bones. Based on the
Atomic
bones.
theory.
Based
Can't
on the
observe an
bones.
individual water molecule. There's another problem here. Sabor regularly says that observations are facts, so to him, an observation can be considered factual.
You just had a slide! You just showed a slide from your position saying so.
Well, we observe Darwinian evolution every single day, so it factually occurs by his own standard.
We don't observe evolution every day.
Random mutations in bacterial colonies leading to entire strains with antibiotic resistance is an example of evolution by
Nope, that's epigenetics.
natural selection.
Sorry.
We observe this repeatedly, so it's a
Nope, we don't. And by the way, the bacteria always remains a bacteria. There's never a time where you observe a bacteria, whether you introduce it man-made or it's natural, that it influences the function of the bacteria. By the way, most of the time, it's a disadvantageous thing. It actually kills off the thing. It doesn't actually produce some Superman bacteria. Either way, it's a bacteria and it remains a bacteria, and it's never not a bacteria. It never leads you to believe that it will eventually not be a bacteria at all. Evolution assumes that if you do this enough, things eventually aren't themselves, right? They splinter off to something else that they aren't. When does that happen? Never.
fact. We also observe speciation. We have
Oh, really?
observed the emergence of new species of microorganisms, plants, and animals. Speciation is evolution. Evolution is therefore a fact.
No. No. The claim that you think happens because you observe a variety of species inside of a clade of the thing that it is. What's in question, Dave Farina, is whether or not a clade, that you call it a clade with all these subcategories of similar things, do you observe them ever divert from their clade or divert from what they are into something else that they're not? No, you never see that.
Now,
for instance, the best example is the insane tail of the Pakicetus, which will come up in almost every debate. Pakicetus, wolf-like land animal, tanning its ass on the beach, dips its toe in, and voila, the beginning happens. Well, the beginning of what, Jimbob? The beginning of the story. Once he was a Pakicetus, a wolf-like land animal, sun-tanning his a-hole on the beach. He dipped his little pawsies in the water and saw that he can go crab fishing. Yum, yum. And he went deeper into the water for bigger crab and found a fish. Yum, yum. And then there was a random mutation that had nothing to do with the water that said, whoa, my body kind of wants to go deeper in the water. And so at some point, the Pakicetus, the land animal that's like a wolf size, is wolfy paddling. Woo, woo, woo. And at some point, there was another random mutation that said, hey, maybe you could hang out in the water a little longer. You know what I'm saying? And it's like, maybe. But after a kabillion, quadrillion, 4,000 million years, so many genetic mutations happened that each population splintered off into a new one that was like the previous one, but not exactly like that. And eventually, with enough successive variations of accidental genomic changes, the entire anatomy changed into a whaley whale, grew different bones, formed different positions of its organs, developed a way of swimming fast and slow, totally changed its mating habits. All in 15 million years, a wolf turned into a whale. Okay, you fucking idiot.
Sabor will probably claim that's not what he means by Darwinian evolution. In fact, he's clearly already obfuscating and trying to talk about more modern paradigms. He's going to say he meant common ancestry, tree of life, all the stuff that Noble talks about. In addition, that's what he doesn't like. That's fine. We can talk about all these other things. We can talk about Noble. We can talk about all these other mechanisms that you don't actually understand. But first, concede the debate. Darwinian evolution factually occurs, and men never do a debate with this dumb fuck title ever again.
God, he's such a punchable person.
This is the title of the debate.
Just look at his face. Look at that face. Unbelievable. That's a face only a wall would love.
That you chose. If you want to talk about something else, concede the debate, and then we'll talk about your other topics instead. For now, let's proceed with what I thought the debate was going to be about. So,
the beginning of life? I'm sorry. Why do you have a beginning of life on your chart, sir?
if speciation happens today, it is logical to extrapolate that it has happened in the past to proceed to produce the species that are here, which gives us common ancestry.
So changes we see today, it probably happened in the past. Therefore, populations in the past give you entirely new, completely distinct, completely dissimilar populations today. Okay, no, that doesn't follow.
Sabor especially despises common ancestry of the great apes. He has zero ability.
Hey, look, a chart, guys.
To address the field of biological anthropology.
I'm sorry, you kind of started with the general formation of this population, this organism that looks a certain way. Why did you start arbitrarily, sir? Why did you start with a human-looking kind of ape-like thing? Don't you have to go back a little further, Dave? Notice how his initial claim here with this chart today back to the beginning of life, and then you go, oh, are you going to keep that chart flow? No, he's not. He's going to change it to this. Right? Now, notice how inconsistent this is. You go look at this chart over here and look at this timeline. Like, how many years from their view is this? You see this last section here? Oh, you guys don't see it. Hold on a second. Let me make this a little smaller. You see this last section over here? Oh, you don't see the mouse, but the last section of today, that one inch thing right there, that today section, when he talks about apes on the next slide, I would argue that the time frame he's actually looking at is nearly invisible in relation to this last inch. I mean, what I'm saying is the sliver of time he's about to show in the next slide is so tiny in comparison, not just to this grand scale timeline, but just the last inch there where it says today. You can't even see this sliver. It's so small.
Common ancestry. Sabor especially despises common ancestry of the great apes. He has zero ability to address the field of biological anthropology and just pretends it doesn't exist. There are precisely zero anthropologists who do not accept the fact that humans are apes and that we have recent common ancestry with other apes. This was hypothesized, thus predicting transitional forms.
He wants to put a break in the timeline that says yada, yada, yada. Absolutely.
And then dozens of transitional species were found. That's science. The tree...
No, dude, that's not science. That's not science, dude. You can't just call something a transitional species, dude. You need a methodology for that, you little snake. You little pig snake. You little evolution merchant. You little happy evolution merchant. No, that's not science, bro. That's affirming the thing that's in question. That's all you did right there. You don't get away with that shit. Fucking douchebag. That's science. Oh, yeah, no, we just call something a transitional thing. All right, no, that's what's in question.
Tree of life will never be overturned. It can be revised. Of course, individual clades are reorganized every day, but it will never go away. Common...
Sorry, even clades and species, according to your own best professors, admittedly, are arbitrary. Sorry. So let me get this straight. Evolution holds that it's objectively a fact that speciation occurs, but also holds in the next premise that species itself is not an objective category. Arbitrary category. Cooked. What are you talking about? Oh, no, totally. I mean, a species and clades are completely arbitrarily defined taxonomy. We don't know where they begin or end. It's just a way, it's like a tool for describing the thing that we are calling objective, which assumes the objectivity of species. In other words, you can't state that the objective fact about speciation is true without holding to species is an objective thing. You can't say it's objectively true that this non-objective arbitrary thing that you can't nail down the definition of changes. You can't say that.
And ancestry is factually true. Even if you include, he loves to talk about horizontal gene transfer, endosymbiotic events, all these other things. This is just a revision of details. It's not rewriting everything, right? It doesn't somehow render phylogeny invalid. Of course, he's got all these colorful analogies he usually likes to toss out here, like the tree of life is not well substantiated. It's like having 13 pages of a...
He grants himself universals and denies them. Yes, there's a massive philosophical problem with evolution that they don't like to talk about. And what happens, what's interesting, is that when you attack the granular claims, or let's say the lackluster explanations at the granular level, which I bring up, this is why I'm so focused on the liver and other things. Once you press them on the granularity of their claims and demonstrate for the audience that they can't explain anything, they can't explain anything. You know what I mean? So they can't explain what's happening, but they just assume it's happening, and then they're like, you're just a denier. I don't even know what I'm denying because you can't even tell me what's happening. That's how bad evolution is. I can't even deny it. I can't deny it because they can't tell me what to deny. But when you press them on this, all of these things that they're saying happens needs to happen within these populations or species or clades. They think everything in its clade dies in its clade, right? They think a human will die as a human. The entire category of human will die as a human. And at the same time, they have to say there's a moment where all of humans have a population level random mutation that all of these individuals in the population somehow have at the same time, by the way. Because where does a genetic mutation happen if it's not at the individual? Think about that. It's another massive hole in their position. A genetic mutation, a random mutation, happens inside a singular organism. They have to assume that the same genetic mutation happens in a multiplicity of similar organisms. Or there's like a father-mother pair that is the sole father and mother of all populations, right? They almost have this is what's really fascinating, philosophically speaking. They almost have their own Adam and Eve. They almost have their singular parent. Now, they talk about LUCA, which is an acronym, as the original universal objective soul beginning ancestor of all things, right? That's like their Adam. But from their view, there needs to be some replication and multiplication happening, right? They need to go forth, be fruitful and multiply from their evolutionary paradigm. What's wild is that this idea of random mutation producing the same effects at a population level, but knowing that random mutation from their view happens at the particular level, they need a justification for a singular random mutation happening in one organism in a population. At the same time, many of them occurring that produce similar effects at the same time. The mathematics on this alone are insane.
A big old book like War and Peace, so many missing species. This is completely idiotic. He has no idea how many species are missing. We know of millions. And
Rage Page says a large group of species are affected, thus causing offspring to be genetically mutated. That's what's in question. You can't say a large group of species are affected. You need a mechanism for that, Rage Page. That's what's in question, dude. Now, I don't know if you're defending it or what, but that's the point. A large group of species need to be affected, but you need to tell me how a large group of species are all affected by what is otherwise known as a particular. How does a particular happen at a universal level? It's nominalism. That's what's so crazy is evolution reduces to a nominal view, which is everything is a particular epiphenomenal effect that's unique on its own. It's novel. There's nothing quite like it. But then you're saying, yeah, that thing happened, but at a massive scale. And you go, how? Well, the mechanism that we know is random mutation. Well, sorry, dude. Even the most charitable approach, giving you a mutation that is beneficial, even if I granted a beneficial mutation, those are the least. I wouldn't even grant that happens, but if it did, it's the least common. And it happens what? Where? It happens at an individual level, not at a population level.
We have, whenever we find new ones, they fall into the tree nicely. So it's not really like a book with a plot. It's more like
more pictures and puzzles. No explanatory power.
1,000-piece jigsaw puzzle. How many pieces do we need? A few hundred? If we have 952, can we be confident far beyond reasonable doubt what the puzzle is?
Hey, fuckhead. Have you noticed that puzzles require a mind with intent to piece them together? That means directionality. That means teleology. That means there's a purpose to coming together. You have to say that they randomly came together like a puzzle. That's like arguing using your analogy that a puzzle comes together on its own. Fuckhead.
If it's a hot air balloon, what are those last few pieces going to change? Not much.
Oh, you're such a douchebag.
Okay. Of course.
You stupid, greasy douchebag. This is like Peterson saying computing. I don't know, you guys caught the debate. A key tripwire that I planted that I didn't want to put in my opening. I wanted him to say it. I got him to say it. From his view, human beings are computational. They're like calculators, right? This is how determinism can make sense of the world in our mind, right? Sorry, dude. Same problem. Computation assumes coding. Computation in every way we know about it, including like a puzzle. Everything we know about a puzzle or a computer is that it necessitates a mind and a direction, purpose. You greaseball. You are a complete blemish on the Italian population. Shame on you.
Sabor needs to fabricate some kind of uncertainty into science he doesn't like, so he does what every other science-denying pseudo-intellectual moron does. He whines about Thomas Kuhn and paradigm shift. Every electric universe crank I've ever seen uses this book to pretend that Einstein is obsolete and being overturned. Every paradigm is replaced. All of science is constantly shifting. Everything we know is wrong at all times. So the biggest paradigm shift in the history of science, and the one he always cites, is modern physics, or the shift
What does that have to do with evolution, dude?
from classical Newtonian mechanics to quantum mechanics and relativity. Even in this extreme example, the existing paradigm is not discarded. It works just fine, and we continue to use it to this day. It is not wrong. It just got limited to the motion of objects larger than an atom that go nowhere near the speed of light. For example, Newton's law of universal gravitation, this law still works just fine. To apply Sabor's attitude, will we shift away from Einstein's paradigm?
Does he believe what he's saying? I don't know. I think he found a niche. Like, I think he failed as like a entertainer and a singer and a musician. And he got himself into this world where he calls himself a professor, which he's not. That's misleading indeed. And so he's gotten into this world of like, I'm a science communicator, right? And he's been very successful. So he's not going to give up his status right now. I think he believes what he's saying.
Paradigm 2, is it a fact that space-time warps around massive objects or not? If we get a theory of everything, will this fact cease to be true? If not, then why pretend the previous paradigm is worthless? It isn't. Look at how atomic theory has evolved over time. With each discovery, everything about the previous model continued to be true. We just got additional layers of detail and precision. Never did new information reveal that atoms don't exist. So the same goes for evolution. Discovering new mechanisms does not mean that the old ones don't exist. The core principles put forward by Darwin of descent with modification and natural selection are objectively true and continue to be true. They just aren't the whole picture. Biologists today all acknowledge the validity of Darwin's work as the forefather of evolutionary biology, but none of them are Darwinists. We're past that, and all of the mechanisms he wants to bring up from Noble and whatever he wants to talk about, none of that invalidates Darwinian evolution, which is the title of the debate. So again, concede this, then we'll talk about whatever you want. So it's pretty much we're saying what could possibly overturn something like atomic theory? You'd have to put forward something that explains every single experiment in the history of chemistry. Same with evolution. We observe it every day. It's the cornerstone of biology. The details are refined, not the full picture. Of course, Sabor has his list of reasons that evolution in particular is no good. He's always talking about probabilistic frameworks and assumptions and disputes.
Yeah, probabilism, the probabilistic aspect of evolution is horrifying for the proponent, though. That's for sure. I mean, it's so bad. Like it's so bad that even just looking at basic things like organized amino acids into some functional protein, like that's insane already. Mathematically impossible, not observed. And then you have to then expand the function, and then it gets more complex, and then it gives direction to new emergent items in the organism. And they have to have this view that everything is just bottom up. That's their epistemology, by the way. It's interesting. When you look at these paradigms, there's a true dilemma in epistemology, and it's referred to as theonomous versus autonomous, which is all knowledge and truth is from God and it's discoverable, or knowledge and truth is just a illusory feature of the natural world and humans build it up from the bottom. We just kind of craft it like we're playing with toys. Now, it's interesting. That's epistemology. We're doing philosophy now. But what's interesting is that their material model is reflective of their epistemic model. Their view of evolution mirrors their view of their epistemology. Isn't that interesting? The Christians' epistemology, their view of the material world is reflective of their epistemology. That's wild to me because they're not the same exact things. Our formulation, our model of how the world is and how it became how it is, from an evolutionary model, it has to be bottom up. It grew out of the ground, like their epistemology. Christian has a top down. It's a revelatory model that necessitates creation. Top down, bottom up. Now that's really fascinating to me because they really aren't the same exact categories. Epistemology is one of the branches of a worldview, and the strict material world, how it operates, right? It assumes your epistemology, but it doesn't automatically mean that it will reflect it like a mirror, but it does. I've never seen that before until right now. All scientists had to figure out at the end of the 19th century was black body radiation. How did that go? Thank you, Unhipbone. Appreciate that. Like the viewer ratio is, it is atrocious. But, I mean, how many hate watchers do I have? You know what I'm saying? I mean, what did I build here? Almost 600 people here. You know, do me a favor. Drop out of the chat. Hit the thumbs up for a second. Jeez. For goodness sake.
Evolutionary biology is not any more probabilistic than any other science. That doesn't mean anything. It does not apply the scientific method any differently than chemistry or physics.
Oh, wow, that's a lie. That's a total lie. Let's look at this slide. Well, wait till he's done, and I'll stop it.
Sabor loves to toss around.
No, hold on. We can't skip over that, buddy. Nice try. Let's take this slowly. Evolutionary biology is not any more probabilistic than any other science. Yeah, it's less. It's less. First of all, probability, Dave, I don't know if you know this because you're a douchebag. Probability requires something. Unless you're doing completely, purely hypothetical Bayesian stuff. Probability requires access to two things: favorable outcomes and unfavorable outcomes. The reason we can know the probability of the roulette table is because we have access to both. Evolutionary biology and its affirming of things that happened in the past based on some causal chain of events, which you can't explain, by the way, you not only have access to favorable outcomes because that's the thing in question, you don't have access to unfavorable outcomes. So you can't even do probability. In fact, if 7 on the roulette table is synonymous to the mechanism, this happened, this mechanism made evolution happen, we don't even know what the 7 is under evolutionary biology. You just say random mutation, but we don't know what that means. We don't know what you're saying. Are you saying random mutation sets off a line of successive changes to the DNA structure itself that eventually produces hyper-specific organs inside of a body? Is that what happened? Where's your evidence of that? Why would you think that? You have no reason. 1, make observations. Yeah, this is what I love to do with evolution tards. I ask them the observation, and you've all seen it. Every time I have a call-in or a debate on evolution, it's the same cope. They start with a observation, and you know what? Do we ever get past number 2 in the scientific method? No, we don't. We never get past number 2, which is a hypothesis. Never once. This whole system right here, Dave, when I debate you, sir, this section is going to completely nuke you.
It does not apply the scientific method any differently than chemistry or physics. Sabor loves to toss around the terms homology and homoplasy to pretend that evolutionary biologists just make up whatever they want. This is idiotic. These are homologous structures. We know they are homologous because they are made from the same parts.
Based on the bones. Yeah. Based on the bones.
Every time with these douchebags. Look, homology, things are similar. Yeah? Does that mean that they share function or they come from each other? Huh? What is it? Look, guys, look how similar the cat is to a human. They have similar function. Their bones in their leg do a similar thing. Therefore, what? Therefore, what?
Radius, ulna, carpals, metacarpals, phalanges. They are just molded to different shapes, something easily explainable by evolution. Slow morphological change on consistent structural features to yield totally different purposes. That's
No, dude. No. What you just said is sneaky because the thing that you're making similar is the same purpose. That's what you're pointing to. We would agree. Different animals that are unrelated have similar purpose. Well, this is a problem, Dave Farina. Why? Because under the evolutionary view, it's true that something with similar phenotype, their bones,
based on the bones,
things with similar phenotype, similar anatomy, it doesn't follow that they come from each other or they're similar in genotype. So you got a big problem. Not only that, but under the evolutionary view, if you go back far enough, you have to affirm that something completely dissimilar in both phenotype and genotype are your ancestors. If you go back far enough, something that is completely unlike the thing that you're saying it came from, you have to say, well, that happened too. So it's a problem because their standard for saying one thing came from another is similarities in their genetics and or their phenotype. When in reality, if you go back far enough, they have to say things are similar even with dissimilar genotype and phenotype.
That's not how design works. We don't build planes out of boat parts, and yet nature sometimes makes legs and fins and wings out of the same parts.
Boat parts?
Because it can't scrap it.
That's a bad analogy. We could build a plane out of boat parts. The fact that we don't do it is not in favor for you because planes and things that are built with function, with tasks, have a mind behind them. You have to say that these things, if you're going to use this as an analogy, you're going to have to say that a boat came into existence for no reason at all.
Everything and start from scratch. It is not sentient. Homoplasy, on the other hand, describes analogous features. They have superficial similarity, like the same function, but do not indicate...
Wrong. There's no such thing as function, Dave Farina, under the evolutionary view. So they borrow purpose, they borrow function, and you can't define function without purpose. So a big philosophical problem, again, borrowing from an ordered system that would ultimately be theistic. And they go, well, there's no real function to these. I got Planet Peterson to say toward the end during questions that his brain has no purpose. But he would say, my brain has a function, though. And you go, what's its function? And he goes, it's purposeless. It's a purposeless function. The octopus eye here on the page has a function, but it's purposeless. All of these things are purposeless. And by the way, who are we to say that the beautiful human eye with the eyelashes and the beautiful reflection of the universe inside of the eye, who are we to say that that's complete? You know what I'm saying? Like, under this guy's view, the things he's pointing to, he calls an eye. He couldn't actually hold that they're an eye the same way he can't hold that species are universal and static. Not only are under the evolutionary view... Oh, here comes Vagine, someone who's also evolving.
Full white Jimbob. This is half black. By nature, what is a boat or a plane without a mind to label them? Also, once again, all living things are carbon-based life forms. Therefore, we are related to all carbon. Rock emoji.
That's right. That's right. Even like they like to look at genetics as its own specific, unique thing, but ultimately, Half Black Justin is right. That's still just material structure, shared composition, similarity in pure physicality. No different than the carbon or the water or the bones or the calcium or anything else that's similar between things. It's all just turns into a big monistic party. But this part is crucial here. How Professor Dave and his douchebag friends, they talk about these things as if they're universal things, universal parts, like an eye. We know what an eye is? Well, no, under evolution, an eye is just an accidental epiphenomenal effect of a long process that happens to do a task that's very proficient. But it's also could be changing. It could be changing.
Recent common ancestry. We can tell because they actually are very different. That the eye evolved many times is not hard to swallow. Even in extant life, we see a variety of complexities for vision. All you need is a photoreceptor selectively expressed on certain cells.
Yeah, dude, all you need is to grant yourself something and then you have the perfect human eye. No, that's asserting the thing that's in question. Again, Dave, you greaseball fuck. All you need is things made of similar things, and then you have it. If something has a skin receptor cell that's reflective and sensitive to light, therefore you can grow an eye. Really? Look at him. Look at him draw out the process he can't explain. He just draws a cartoon of it. Look, nerve fibers and light-sensitive cells. How'd you get nerve fibers, you fuck? Have you ever thought about that? How do you get nerve fibers from evolution, douchebag?
I just get so mad. I just get so mad.
How do you get light-sensitive cells placed in similar places? This is even reflecting a fully formed eyeball, you dummy. Oh, if you just grant yourself nerve fibers that are also accidentally connected to light-sensitive cells, then you can... This is the same thing. What is the pattern with these pricks? They give themselves populations to say one thing changes to another. I go, interesting. Isn't a population itself having to be the product necessarily of the evolution that you're affirming? They have to say yes. And then they go, but you need to grant me populations. I go, no, I don't. Same thing. We're just doing it at a micro level. He grants himself a population of nerve fibers. Well, I'm sorry, Dave Farina. Nerve fibers have to be also produced from the process. Nerve fibers themselves have to be the product, under your view, of the same process that you're trying to put up on the screen right now, where one thing turns to another. What was a nerve fiber before it was a nerve fiber, Dave? Was it a not nerve fiber? You greasy prick.
Now the organism can sense light.
Now it can just do it. By the way, the organism now can do a thing. Wow. Way to grant yourself the next chapter of your fantasy book. Now it can do it, guys. You see, I drew it out on the page. I granted myself nerve fibers inside an organism that needed to produce it from not having it. And it also grew light-sensitive cells. And once you grant me that, including the organism, which is probably part of a population that also needs to be justified, I grant myself all those things because I'm Dave Farina. I'm a greasy prick. No, dude. Nobody's granting you any of that. You little slime ball.
Over time, features evolve that improve this function, like a lens, cornea, etc. This is all sequential and piecemeal.
Oh, yeah, it's just sequential. Just say that it happened. That's real good science. Duh, Jimbob, it just is. Boom, I owned you. I owned you. I totally owned you.
Unlike the caricature that Sabor paints, we don't just assume that everything with structural or functional similarity is immediately related. For example, swimming fast is important to aquatic animals, so they tend to adopt similar shapes. Those,
yeah, exactly.
which are...
So this is a great point. What do you use to arbitrate between similarity due to functionality and use versus similarity driven from ancestry? How do you do it? How do you choose which one comes from the other versus which one, under your own view, could have just as well developed accidentally anyway? Which they have to hold, by the way, if you guys aren't following. Two completely, entirely different branches and clades develop over time exact features, but they're not related. Do you understand what they're saying? Do you understand this? Two entirely different, unrelated clades of things in the process of coming from one divine universal ancestor, one unique point in time. Even if you granted the one unique point in time in which all things spawn from, their Adam, their Eve, even if you granted that, under their view, those things didn't share the same mechanisms anyway over time. Like different mechanisms and different features developed these things independent of each other from random mutation. That is to say, more clearly, just so you know, things that are entirely unrelated developed completely universal mechanisms independently. That is to say, two things splintered off from one thing, and in that process, randomly, both produced a highly functional thing called a liver. That's what they have to say. Mr. Super Chat? Okay, hold on. Let me actually catch up quick, because I'm getting really mad. Now I'm just getting real mad about it all. By the way, thank you for buying your books. For everyone who got books, go to MadeByJimbob.com. I would say my stream is sponsored by my own authored comics, which are hilarious. Even my opposition buys them. You can go to MadeByJimbob.com, get all three for a super deal. They're all signed, and MadeByJimbob ships them out nearly immediately. And so you want to get these for Christmas, for gifts, for yourself. Give a couple out. Keep them all yourself. Go to MadeByJimbob.com for that, okay, guys? And let me take a look at my behind on Super Chats. It's a good problem. Thank you guys for giving me a good problem. Jimbob is right. Alter Void. Why does the function of an eye even matter? Maybe the function in the future may be different. Yes, Alter Void. You just ask them. Can the eye under evolution... You know how they say a human group will die as a human group. Okay, yeah, but it still needs to create some splinter effect that produces a non-human eventually, right? Or not? Yeah, that could happen. So what? So there's one moment where one thing splinters from a human is not a human, but it comes from a human? That's weird. Well, they have to say the same thing, Alter Void, for items. That the items, are they going to say, no, once you have an eye, the eye exists until it's dead, no longer an eye, completely. But there might be some derivative of an eye that streams away from an eye that becomes something else that it's not. Why? Well, what's inconsistent with that? Why don't you just bite the bullet, guys? How would you even know that any part of my body isn't becoming another part, right? You know what I'm saying? Like, how do you know that humans won't have a dick nose? And you're like, stop smelling me, bro. Dustin for $5. See that there carbon fiber hood under my Chevy? She's my cousin. Nice. Yes, Draco pointing out the like to viewer ratio being atrocious. Yeah, shame on you all. Shame on every one of you. All right. Should we get back to the dolphin? This guy. All assertions, just crazy, dude.
Conducive to swimming fast, namely this torpedo shape. Same environment, same selective pressures, so we can expect similar phenotypes, even though they aren't closely related.
Yeah.
In contrast, something like pharyngeal gill slits support common ancestry because they are remnants of embryonic development in ancestral forms. They do not become gills. They follow some other pathway due to specific mutations that alter the progress of embryonic development at a particular time. Homology is not an assumption. It is a deductive inference.
It's amazing. Like, this guy thinks because in the early stages there's something similar to a gill that does a similar task inside of liquid that kind of sifts out oxygen for a specific time in their life, but then it doesn't continue. He thinks that's evidence that it came from a fish, which is insane because think about it. When you look at human beings, the only way you could observe such a phenomenon in a specific time in their development, given that it has a specific purpose, given that fetuses are inside of fluid, he says, well, we came from fish or something because of that, right? Because, obviously we have gills or we have tails. And you're like, well, no, there's a problem with this because the thing you're pointing at grants human beings as two sexes that come together and produce this thing. You need to tell me, Dave Farina, how you even got humans with two separate sexes that need to come together, produce, conceive, where the woman expands her stomach and inside a child is growing. Right? Why would the gill precede a future that doesn't exist? Why would a gill for a pre-human keep itself around for a future where your parents are not underwater? You know what I mean? Like you have to piece this together like it's a set of dominoes unfolding. You have to look at it this way. If you look at it like a bunch of dominoes unfolding, the more absurd it gets. I don't know if you guys understand how insane that is. Human beings live outside of water right now. We come together using two sexes. We conceive a child, and inside the womb, for a very specific function, the fetus, the unborn person, can live inside a pure fluid until it doesn't. From his view, not only does he have to explain how humans develop from into two sexes, from not that, he has to go back in time and develop not that, because that needed to develop too, right? Under evolution, two sexes, nubby, 1/8 of dick needs to grow out, a dimple, 1/8 of a vagina needs to grow out independently. Well, then, so he's saying like, well, look, we have a similar thing inside the womb that's like gill-like, that does a similar function. Therefore, Uncle Fish or anything, Uncle anything. That doesn't follow, dude. You've actually just made the story of evolution even harder to convey.
Based on empirical evidence of shared ancestry. If we're so hopeless when it comes to determining which structural features are due to common ancestry and which are not, then why are we not even remotely confused when we assign things like this? Why is it so easy to conclude that pterodactyls and parrots are not as closely related as pterodactyls and non-flying dinosaurs? Some homologies are difficult to interpret, others aren't. That's just science. We should note that
that's such a cope, dude. That is such a cope. So anything that's non-explained or inconsistent, his cope is it's just hard to interpret. Unbelievable. These people are such maggots.
Admits that he has no issue with whales evolving from land mammals or other examples of extremely significant evolutionary change, which is good.
Look at, here we go. It never misses. It never misses. The Pachycetus. Here we go. Are you guys ready? Are you guys ready for the funniest evolution story known to man? Basically, it's as wild as they think creation itself is. You know what I mean? It's as wild. It's insane. Austin Titilio, nice to meet you again, Austin. $10. You already said it, but I'll say it again. Dave is a disgrace to all Italians. Probably never used a pipe wrench before. That boy got soft hands. Yeah, $10 from Ultravoid for your information. Just learned a new thing yesterday. Pigs can actually breathe using their assholes. Why do I want that to be true? I would be able, if I could do that, I would take way longer baths.
Since we have countless fossils that represent lineages from fish to tetrapods, land.
Unbelievable. We have evidence, right? Dude, we found a thing that looked like another thing. Therefore, fish climbed out of water to become not fish.
Mammals to ocean mammals, dinosaurs to birds, and all the
Unbelievable.
rest. Transitional hominid species embody the exact same principles as.
By the way, if I'm losing you technically on some of this, what he just said, it's a simple question to expose that this douchebag and everyone like him has no methodology. Methodology for what you say? I'll tell you. When he says, there's a thing I found that looks like another thing that we have today. The thing we have today is in land. The thing we found was in water. It looks like it became this thing. And you go, how do you know it wasn't just something that lived in water, died in water, never splintered off into this new thing? Versus it did. It did. How do you do that? They can't tell you. This is why I ask it in every debate, using the camel world view. An alpaca and a camel, you take two similar things. You hypothetically introduce a scenario in which someone finds a smaller version, what looks like a camel, and they go, well, it must have, been the ancestor. This camel today we see comes from this. It looks similar, right? You go, yeah, but how do you determine whether or not you just found an animal that happened to die out that could have just as well, if it survived, lived among this similar camel-looking thing today without assuming common ancestry? How do you determine that? They don't have an answer to this.
As all these other lineages, if land mammals can evolve into whales and dolphins, then this small amount of variation in the common ancestry of the great apes.
That doesn't even make sense. It doesn't even make sense. The thing they say, they always make fun of us creation tards, for saying it's like a Pokemon. They listen to what he just said. He has to deny what he just said.
That's just science. We should note that Sabor regularly admits that he has no issue with whales evolving from land mammals or other examples of extremely significant evolutionary change, which is good since we have countless fossils that represent lineages from fish to tetrapods, land mammals to ocean mammals, dinosaurs to birds, and all the rest. Transitional hominid species embody the exact
This guy knows about transitional.
same principles as all these other lineages. If land mammals can evolve into whales and dolphins,
If land animals can evolve into dolphins and whales, that violates the law of identity, by the way. When I get rigorous, when I cross-examine these idiots, they go, well, no, land animals evolved into... Well, no, that never happens under the evolution paradigm. Because you argue that the thing, the clade or the subcategory of the clade itself, that stays itself and dies itself. That thing never evolves. So what happens? How do you say one thing evolved into another thing? Well, let's get rigorous. You're not making that claim, are you? Instead, you're arguing that one thing, one category of a species, like the Pakicetus, remains the Pakicetus until Pakicetuses die. But during that process, there was a random mutation that happened when they had sex, right? By the way, keep in mind the Pakicetus needs to come from something else. They always arbitrarily start with a universal animal category, and you go, yeah, but why do I grant you the universal category of that animal? And they go, listen, I'm not talking about abiogenesis. And I go, neither am I. But the problem for evolution is that they can't avoid abiogenesis. And the reason is, if any evolution proponent says, we're not talking about abiogenesis, we're talking about evolution, what they're saying in translation is, I want you to grant me populations, please. And we go, no. Why can't you grant me populations? I'll tell you why, Dave, and everyone in the chat who thinks like this guy. We don't grant you populations because populations, under the evolutionary view, must be a phenomenon produced by evolution.
then this small amount of variation in the common ancestry of the great apes is absolutely trivial and is better substantiated than almost any other lineage, given the thousands of specimens we have over dozens of species and multiple genera. He has no ability to dispute any of this. He just shouts circular reasoning and other bullshit as though that is a valid refutation of entire fields of science. There is no circular reasoning.
Look at that. You found things that look similar. Like, you have no idea whether that's retard, deformity. You have no idea. You have to presuppose there's entire civilizations, millions of human-looking things that aren't human. Millions that did things. that had tools, that lived a certain way, that hunted a certain way, that ate a certain way. You find a couple of stragglers or whatever that look human, and you go, oh, well, look, it's kind of different enough to say that used to be its entirely new identity of a group of beings. Entire identity. We're talking about millions of years of necessary generations of these things. They extrapolate from these single novel finds that look different, look a little bit different than the current human skull, and they assume entire civilizations of these things. Old Kobo 25 says they have to believe the hind leg bones morphed into vertebrae. Right. Preposterous enough without wondering how the nerves go inside the leg. Yeah, that's a good point. Even if you you don't concede, but even if you granted a process, you say, okay, I'm going to grant you this turned into this. You just say how. You know why? Because like old Kobo is pointing out, think about your body. Think about all the individual parts that do something specific in your body. You have your brains, you have your eyes, you have your nose, you have your olfactory settings, you have teeth, you have a tongue, you have an esophagus, you have ears, you have nipples. You have hair, you have a heart, you have a liver, you have a pancreas, you have this, you have organs, you have all of this. And you would get these people to agree that each of these things are unique in their purpose and their function, but also interconnected in a way that unifies the system. It unifies it in a working system. From their view, not only the parts in the body I just named emerged from random processes, but also their connectivity, that the superhighways we have in our body are their own type of organ that have their own unique purpose, their own unique category of function, different from the others, that also develop from random mutation, randomly connecting superhighways to super cities. That's what you have to think happens in evolution. That all of random cities, a random functioning nation called a human body, developed from random mutation and connected together and worked together from random mutation.
Generate hypotheses and test them, finding all of these hominin specimens that were...
Atheist says, we got organs and body parts in order of how a baby is born when it comes... Dude, you gotta be trolling me, dude. How'd you get a baby, dude? Are you really this retarded?
What would you say if I told you I was mentally retarded?
Are you trolling me? I still haven't figured if Atheist 5K is a troll. We got organs and body parts in order of how babies are born when we come out in 9 months. Yeah, no shit. Where'd you come from? Oh, you came from another body that has those organs. Fucking asshole.
What would you say if I told you I was mentally retarded?
Shame.
What would you say if I told you I was mentally retarded?
Shame.
What would you say if I told you I was mentally retarded?
Shame.
What would you say if I told you I was mentally retarded?
Shame.
What would you say if I told you I was mentally retarded?
Shame.
What would you say if I told you I was mentally retarded?
Shame.
What would you say if I told you I was mentally retarded?
Shame. Atheist, you keep your mouth shut.
predicted is a vindication of the model. Sabor also just regurgitates crap he learned in Philosophy of Science 101 as though it makes him sound intelligent. Evolution bad because swan can be black. He loves his black swan example. And
what's up, Wi-Fi?
And the scatter plot and these kinds of things. Once again, science produces exclusively a posteriori knowledge, which is based on observation. All of science is inductive. He rages against this science in particular because it contradicts his baseless faith. Furthermore, placing deduction on a pedestal above induction is silly. Deductive reasoning applied to real-world concepts also relies on induction. Premises are based on observations, which are inductive inferences. Take the famous Aristotelian syllogism, how do we know that all men are mortal? Observation, induction. Lastly, just like any other intelligent design propagandist, Sabor pretends there is so much controversy and debate within the scientific community. There isn't. And as predicted, he points to figures like Dennis Noble to pretend this much. And
he does talk like a snarky woman. He talks like he could be featured on The View. Like if you just swapped one of the chicks on The View with this guy, it would just be like, what? Was it always like this?
And I'm sorry, Sabor, he is a joke, and you know so little about him that you don't even know that he's not an evolutionary biologist. He's a physiologist. He's not an evolutionary biologist. He's funded by the Templeton Foundation to spread this kind of propaganda.
Oh, yeah, so propaganda can be funded by an organization, but the Royal Society couldn't do that, Dave Farina, you fucking dumb goblin bitch boy. I hate you. I hate your whole lineage. Sorry. Yeah, so now propaganda exists. So let me get this straight. Propaganda could exist against your view, but your view doesn't have propaganda? You slimy toad.
To give some creationists something to talk about. That 2016 meeting you're talking about was funded by the Templeton Foundation. Nobody in evolutionary biology gives two shits about this guy. I'm very sorry to tell you. So
that's not an argument. I don't give a shit. We don't give a shit what you say. We like making fun of you, so that's not an argument, dude.
So to conclude, is Darwinian evolution a fact? Well, is it a fact that the Earth goes around the sun, even though this fact is derived from heliocentric theory? If yes,
theories don't produce, theories don't produce truth. This is the problem with these people. They take the word science and theories and they're not rigorous. They just obfuscate. They just make everything so nebulous and impossible to discern. A theory, what are we talking about? Scientific theories are produced from the scientific method. They're on the magnitude of likelihood statements. Right? That's the value of the scientific method. The scientific method assumes first that there are facts. These things are law-like that we observe. We do induction. We basically assume that these things will maintain in their behavior. The behavior of gas, the behavior of the sun, the behavior of how nature operates descriptively. We assume our statements about those things are true. Then we can do science. Science doesn't produce those regularities, dude. Theories don't produce the facts. Facts are assumed to then do science. These guys are so backwards. I mean, it's just crazy how far we've gone away from true science in less than 100 years. It's insane.
Yes, then facts can be derived from theories, and Darwinian evolution is a fact. If no, then you're going to be hard-pressed to come up with a single thing that qualifies as...
He's saying theories can be facts. That's all he's saying. It doesn't make any sense.
As a scientific fact. To put it another way, if this theory yields this fact, but you pretend other theories are incapable of producing facts, you are cherry-picking the science that you don't like. If this is not a fact, then there are no scientific facts, and the entire debate is pointless, an exercise in preaching to your brain.
Saying scientific fact is meaningless, Dave. You can't do science without the assumption of facts. This is philosophy of science 101. You have to assume a bunch of metaphysics, regularity, your senses, universal categories, language, math, and the rest. Laws of logic and the rest, right? You have to assume these things. Then you could manipulate, assuming that these regularities maintain and your senses are effective and your interpretation of your senses are sufficient, you can do a thing called science, which is a manipulation of matter. This term scientific fact is silly.
Washed flock. And thus we close with an ultimatum for Sabor.
In short, let me just like iterate this. There are laws that we call laws. This is what we refer to as irregularity. We don't have access to their cause. We call them laws. We're describing behaviors that seem to be maintained. Theories never become laws. So Professor Douchebag here would probably agree that what we refer to as a fact is synonymous with a description of a law. He would say, yeah, that makes sense. And then I'd ask him, do theories ever graduate to laws? The answer is no. A theory never graduates to a law. If law is synonymous with fact, then a theory never graduates to a fact, because a fact and a law are synonymous now, dummy. This guy's such a retard.
Which must be fulfilled by the end of the debate. Since this was a debate about Darwinian evolution, take the position that no a posteriori knowledge is certain, so we can never be certain about anything in the universe.
Yeah, that's your worldview.
Which makes the debate meaningless.
That is your worldview. You just made your own freaking debate meaningless, dude. The naturalistic view would have to hold that uncertainty completely. Completely uncertainty.
As you are singling out evolutionary biology due to an ideological agenda, or
unbelievable.
Or two, admit that your definition of fact includes a
MDD just dropped. Okay, cool.
Posteriori knowledge like heliocentrism, which is derived from a theoretical framework, and that you simply fail to demonstrate how evolutionary biology is any less certain than other examples of well-established theories. Your choice, either is fine with me.
This is why when you debate people, you have to presupp them, because when they debate stuff, you don't just grant them their epistemic foundation. You have to ask what it is. So you can't examine evolution without examining the philosophy that's interpreting evolution. Now, they don't like this because it questions their epistemic standard, and then they start crying. And yet, Dave is bringing this up, right? He's saying, if you don't grant me certain things that have to be the case, then, you know, it's not fair. We go, what do you mean? What do you mean it's not fair? That's like Planet Peterson. When it comes out, you guys will see in his opener, he telegraphed that I would question him on his system of knowledge, his epistemology, which is totally fair in a debate about worldviews. And he said, Jimbob is probably going to counter me and say from my naturalistic paradigm that's strictly mechanistic that I don't have access to truth or knowledge. You think predicting that about me makes you immune to answering the question? No, it's a big problem. Every fact was once a theory until it got proven correctly. No, you can't say proven correctly, dude. That's a contradiction. Atheist, if you say every fact was once a theory until it got proven correctly, the thing that you think is proven correctly can also be disproven. Endless, dude. So that means your facts, atheist, what a great epistemology. You based your worldview on facts. You mean the thing that are constantly changing under your own view? Unbelievable.
Cool it with the anti-Semitic remarks.
What a smug prick.
Okay, thanks, Dave. That concludes.
Would you grow out? What did you just crawl out of a tree?
His
what are you, some sort of wood nymph?
Remarks. So, excuse me. Well, that mean moving into.
Would you just jump off of, what is that cereal? What did someone's elf on a shelf come to life?
The rebuttal.
Would you have the day off from Gryffindor?
Section of the debate. So each speaker will have 10 minutes to respond to what the previous speaker has said. I just want to remind our speakers that it's perfectly fine to critique the ideas of the opposition and to also question their
Keebler elves. Thank you. Yeah, I couldn't think of it quick enough.
Credentials and things like that. But please keep your criticisms focused on the topic of the debate and relevant to the issue. So with that being said, Sabor will now have 10 minutes of rebuttal. Do you want your slides?
Yes.
Yeah,
I've amended the slides according to some of the things that Farina is claiming. Can I start now?
Yep, go ahead.
All right. So one of the first claims that he actually makes is that no one uses the term Darwinism. Here we have Richard Dawkins in The Devil's Chaplain, basically saying Darwin may be triumphant at the end of the 20th century, but we must acknowledge the possibility that new facts may come to light, which will force us.
I have a feeling he's not going to get into the granularity. Darwinism. I want... Oh, Vagine. Hi, Vagine. Hey, Snagglebeast. What's up?
Hey Jim debate Bob bro. Snagglebeast says, this guy stinks. Have you ever reviewed Dr. Jason Lyle taking about heterozygosity in early creation? It makes way more sense than evolution. One thing he has mentioned that shocked me the first time was the fact that all proven instances of natural selection are a loss of info. It's never gained.
Thank you for that, Snagglebeast. Let's see if let us see if they're back and forth, and maybe I'll move over to Andrew's debate because I think I got enough for a good, concise little clip, a clip fest.
You don't even know how to do a debate based on the topic that you chose. You said Darwinian evolution. Everything you're saying is wrong. You don't understand the definitions of these words. You just said that I said that Darwinian evolution is random mutations and natural selection. I didn't say that, so you either weren't listening or I don't know what's going on over there. Darwin didn't know about mutations. Darwinism precedes the entire field of genetics. Even when neo-Darwinism came about, it still was about Mendelian genetics, so we still didn't know about DNA. So all these other mechanisms you want to allude to has nothing to do with Darwin.
Dude, calm down. You're gonna knock your mic over with your beak.
Darwinian evolution. So like I said, look, we can talk about any of these other things you want, but this was the debate title that you chose. So, and it's also why you went first, because that way you could talk about whatever.
This, you know, Dave Farina sends like 2 types of wine choices back when he goes to a restaurant. There's, you know what I mean?
You wanted and pretend that I'm off topic. I'm the one talking about the topic that you chose. Darwinian evolution is descent with modification and natural selection.
Yeah, that doesn't tell us anything. I don't care how much you pinch your fingers together. Fuckhead. I really despise this man. Whatever you just said doesn't explain how this stuff happens, dude.
That factually happens. So whatever vernacular you want to use, it's a fact. So
dude looks like one of the rat people in Andrew's debate.
You can admit that evolution by natural selection factually occurs. You lose this debate. Then I'll gladly talk about whatever else you want.
This is so stupid. He's just using a definition and be like, if the definition is what I say it is, then you agree that the definition exists, okay?
Ancestry, we're going to talk about all these things. It's totally fine. But you have to admit that Darwinian evolution factually occurs, right? You can't just distort the definitions.
Atheist says, how long does it take for Jesus not to come to Earth for us to decide that Jesus is dead? That's not even coherent. You should be hunted for sport.
Of all these concepts here. Darwin precedes genetics. He had no idea what mutations are, no random mutations, any of this stuff. So just stop. This is getting ridiculous.
Oh my God, this is ridiculous. This is not the wine I ordered.
The second thing we're going to talk about is, as I predicted, you have no ability to discuss science. All you do is Daddy Dennis Noble said this, this other guy said that.
What a... Dude, look at his face, man. Oh, he is the epitome of smug. He's like if smug was reproduced and it was on the shelves of Walmart and came out of a jar. I mean, that is a smug. He knows it, too. He leans into his smugness so much.
That stop whining about what people say and talk about the science. We're going to talk about all of these mechanisms. We're going to talk about the biology. We're not going to go, this guy did this. And by the way, Dennis Noble, something in Oxford University Press, or whatever. That's not Oxford University. It's a publisher, right? Anybody can publish books. That doesn't mean everything in it is perfect. And it doesn't mean that all of the Oxford faculty is like, yeah.
Can you just give an argument for evolution, please?